At the lawyer's office, I discovered my parents left me nothing. My brother inherited everything. I quietly canceled all transfers. A month later, my mother texted me, "Mortgage is due." I replied, "Not mine. My name is Alice Michelle. I'm 32 years old, and I built my contracting business from nothing, just sweat and determination." Growing up, I was always the responsible daughter, while my younger brother Derek was clearly the favorite. When I received the call about my parents' estate planning meeting, I expected justice after years of supporting them financially and emotionally. I never imagined my own parents would betray me in such a calculated way. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in the suburbs of Boston. My father, Robert, worked in insurance, bringing home a decent salary that kept us comfortable but never wealthy. My mother, Susan, taught third grade at the local elementary school. From the outside, we probably looked like the typical American middle-class family, but inside our house, the dynamics were far from balanced. My brother Derek is 5 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, the center of attention in our family shifted. While I was the serious, studious type who got straight A's and followed the rules, Derek was charismatic, outgoing, and struggled academically. This difference in our personalities might not have been a problem in some families, but in ours, it created a clear division of parental affection. I still remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, had earned a partial scholarship to Boston University, and had been accepted into their competitive engineering program. My parents attended the ceremony, of course, but the celebration afterward was minimal. A quick dinner at Applebee's, a card with $50. And then the conversation quickly shifted to Derek's upcoming baseball tournament. 2 weeks later, when Derek's team won a regional championship, my parents threw a backyard barbecue, invited extended family, and bought him a new gaming system. It wasn't the material difference that hurt, it was the enthusiasm gap. My achievements were acknowledged. Derek's were celebrated. College was when the financial disparities became impossible to ignore. Despite my scholarship, I still needed to cover a significant portion of my tuition. My parents contributed what they could, about a quarter of the costs, but made it clear that I was expected to handle the rest. I took out modest loans and worked 3 part-time jobs, mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the campus library, and weekends doing construction with my uncle's company. I barely slept, but I managed to graduate with minimal debt and valuable work experience. Derek's college experience couldn't have been more different. He attended a private university with tuition significantly higher than mine, despite his mediocre grades. My parents covered all his expenses: tuition, room and board, meal plan, even spending money, while I had to finance most of my own education. When I asked my father about this disparity once, he simply said, "Derek isn't as independent as you, Alice. He needs more support." That pattern continued after graduation. I discovered I had a talent for construction work and project management. I saved every penny from my entry-level job at a construction company, took night classes in business administration, and finally launched Michelle Contracting at 26. Those first 2 years were brutal. 80-hour work weeks, sleeping on a mattress in my office to save on rent, reinvesting every dollar of profit back into the business. No vacations, no love life, just work and determination. Meanwhile, Derek bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere more than a few months. He claimed he was finding his passion, but mostly he was finding his way to bars and parties. When he turned 25, he announced he wanted to open a sports memorabilia store, despite having no retail experience or business knowledge. My parents remortgaged their house to give him $75,000 in startup capital. The business failed in 8 months. Derek blamed the location, the economy, online competition, everything except his own poor management and tendencies to use the store's inventory to impress his friends. My parents wrote off the loss with minimal criticism and continued supporting him financially. During the same period, my father had a health scare, a minor heart attack that required surgery and several weeks of recovery. Insurance covered most of it, but there was still a $30,000 gap. I paid it without hesitation, postponing equipment purchases that would have helped my growing business. My parents thanked me, but there was an air of expectation about it, as if it were simply my duty as the successful daughter. This established a pattern. I became the family's financial safety net while receiving minimal emotional support or recognition. Sunday family dinners became a stage for Derek's latest ideas and ventures, while my business achievements received superficial acknowledgement at best. I sat there listening to my parents get excited about how Derek was finding himself while I was building something real, something sustainable. Last year, when my parents mentioned they were having trouble with their mortgage payments due to rising property taxes, I set up an automatic monthly transfer to their account without hesitation. It was $2,800 a month, money I could have been investing in my business or saving for my own future. But they were my parents, and despite everything, I loved them and wanted to ensure they were comfortable. I never expected gratitude, but I did expect fairness. That's why, when I received the call from Thomas Wilson, my parents' attorney, about an estate planning meeting, I wasn't worried. I assumed it would be a standard discussion about how their modest assets would be divided equally between Derek and me when the time came. After all, while they might have favored Derek emotionally, surely they wouldn't extend that favoritism to financial matters after death, especially given how much I had contributed to their financial stability over the years. I couldn't have been more wrong. The call from Thomas Wilson came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was overseeing a kitchen renovation in Brooklyn. His voice was professionally neutral as he explained that my parents had requested my presence at their estate planning meeting that Friday. When I asked for details, he simply said it would be better to discuss everything in person. Something in his tone unsettled me, but I dismissed it as my own paranoia. Friday arrived, and I pulled up to the law office in downtown Boston, an elegant glass building that screamed expensive hourly rates. I dressed in my best business casual, dark jeans, and a pressed button-down shirt. Construction work doesn't require much formal wear, but I keep a few nice pieces for client meetings. The receptionist directed me to conference room 3. When I entered, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My parents sat rigidly on one side of a long mahogany table, avoiding eye contact. Derek was beside them, fidgeting with his watch, an expensive Tag Heuer I knew he couldn't afford on his own. Attorney Wilson sat at the head of the table, manila folders carefully arranged in front of him. "Alice, thanks for coming," Wilson said, gesturing to the empty chair across from my family. "Now that everyone's here, we can begin." The conference room felt cold despite the spring warmth outside. Artwork that was probably selected to impress clients hung on the walls, abstract pieces in corporate blues and grays. I took my seat, noticing my mother's nervous glance at my father, who was staring fixedly at the table. "As you know," Wilson began, "we're here to discuss Robert and Susan's estate planning. They've made some decisions they feel it's important to communicate clearly while everyone is present." He opened the top folder and pulled out several documents. "I'll be direct. Robert and Susan have decided to put all their assets in Derek's name with him as the sole beneficiary of their estate." The words hung in the air. I must have heard wrong. "I'm sorry. What?" I asked, looking at my parents, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Wilson continued with clinical detachment. "Their house, investment accounts, insurance policies, and personal belongings will transfer to Derek upon their passing. You, Alice, will receive your father's baseball card collection and your grandmother's recipe book, as specifically requested by your mother." I felt like I'd been punched. Baseball cards? A recipe book? After everything I'd done? This is a joke, right? I looked directly at my father, who finally raised his eyes. "Alice," he said, his voice trying to be firm but wavering slightly, "we've thought about this a lot. You're successful. You've built a thriving business." "Derek needs more security than you do," my mother chimed in, her voice high and brittle. "We're just trying to be practical. You've always been so good at taking care of yourself." I turned to Wilson. "Can you explain exactly what assets we're talking about here?" He nodded and began listing them methodically. "The house, valued at approximately $650,000, which you helped them refinance and have been making payments on. Investment accounts totaling approximately $180,000, built partly with money you gave them for their retirement, life insurance policies with combined benefits of $300,000. And then came the bombshell. "Additionally," Wilson continued, "your parents recently took out a new mortgage on the house to provide capital for Derek's new business venture. The mortgage amount is $275,000 with monthly payments of $2,800. My head was spinning. The exact amount I had been transferring monthly. They hadn't needed help with existing mortgage payments. They had paid off their original mortgage years ago. They had taken out this new mortgage to finance another of Derek's doomed business ideas, knowing I would cover the payments. "What business venture?" I asked, looking at Derek, who had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "An upscale sports bar," my mother said quickly, with a note of pride in her voice. "Great location downtown, very promising." "And you expect me to keep making these mortgage payments?" I asked incredulously. My father cleared his throat. "We would appreciate your continued support during this transition period, once Derek's business takes off." "So, let me understand this," I interrupted, struggling to keep my voice even. "You've taken out a new mortgage on your debt-free house to finance Derek's business, knowing I've been making your monthly payments. You've structured your estate plan so that everything you own will go to Derek, and you expect me to keep paying a mortgage on a house that will belong entirely to my brother." The room fell silent. Derek examined his manicured nails. My mother dabbed at non-existent tears. My father shifted uncomfortably. Wilson intervened. "I understand this may come as a surprise." "A surprise?" I laughed, a hollow sound even to my own ears. "A surprise is a birthday party. This is—" I struggled to find the right word. "This is betrayal." "Don't be so dramatic." Derek finally spoke, rolling his eyes. "It's not like you need their money." I stared at my brother, this person who had received everything while I had worked for every crumb. He didn't even have the self-awareness to acknowledge his privilege. In his mind, this was just the natural order of things. Him receiving, me providing. "Is there anything else I should know?" I asked Wilson, ignoring Derek completely. Wilson looked at my parents, then back at me. "The estate plan designates Derek as the primary beneficiary of all assets upon your parents' passing. I suggested a more equitable distribution, but your parents were firm about their wishes." I stood slowly, collecting my jacket. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate your transparency." "Alice, wait," my mother called as I headed for the door. "We should discuss this as a family, maybe Sunday dinner." I turned one last time, taking in the tableau. My nervous parents, my entitled brother, the lawyer with his neat stacks of papers documenting my family's complete disregard for my contributions and sacrifices. "I won't be at dinner," I said quietly. "I have some financial planning of my own to do." I left, ignoring my mother's calls and my father's suddenly authoritative voice demanding I come back. In the elevator down to the parking garage, my phone began buzzing, with texts and calls. I put it on silent and drove home in a state of numb disbelief. The magnitude of the betrayal wasn't fully registering yet. This wasn't about the money itself, it was about what the money represented. Years of unreciprocated support, of being taken for granted, of being valued only for what I could provide. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that in my family's eyes, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was an ATM with a pulse. And it was time to close that account. That night, I finally read the avalanche of messages from my family. My mother's texts ranged from concerned, "Are you okay? Please call us," to guilt-inducing, "After everything we've done for you." My father's were more direct. "You're overreacting. Call immediately to discuss your responsibilities." Derek had sent only one message, again, making everything about you. I turned off my phone and went to bed, preparing for the storm that would follow when my family discovered I had cut off the money flow. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but tonight I needed rest. The weight of financial obligation had been lifted from my shoulders, replaced by the heavier but necessary burden of establishing independence from toxic family ties. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what I'd been giving them. I spent the evening going through my financial records with a fine-tooth comb, documenting every contribution I'd made over the years. The numbers were staggering when laid out in black and white. Derek's college tuition contributions, $14,000, given directly to my parents when they claimed they couldn't cover his sophomore year expenses. Dad's medical bills, $32,475 for the cardiac procedure and follow-up care. Home repairs, $20,750 for a new roof, updated plumbing, and electrical work when they discovered knob and tube wiring in their attic. monthly transfers over the past 5 years, varying amounts averaging about $1,500 monthly before this year's $2,800, totaling over $90,000. Emergency assistance, approximately $15,000 for car repairs, appliance replacements, and other unexpected expenses. The total stunned me. More than $175,000 in just 5 years. Money that could have grown my business faster, bought my own house, or built my retirement savings. As I dug deeper into the bank statements, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Several large withdrawals had been made from my parents' account, to which I had significantly contributed, the day before deposits appeared in Derek's personal account. They had been funneling my financial assistance to him all along. I leaned back in my chair, processing this new level of deception. It wasn't just that they planned to give Derek everything after their death. They had been redirecting my support to him the entire time. Every dollar I thought was helping my parents maintain their standard of living had actually been subsidizing Derek's lifestyle and failed business ventures. The betrayal felt even more complete now. Not only had they excluded me from their will while expecting continued financial support, but they had been systematically deceiving me about where my money was actually going. I was funding Derek's life through what I thought was assistance to my parents. I called my financial advisor, Margaret Jenkins, and scheduled an emergency review. If my family was escalating to workplace confrontations and financial manipulation, I needed to ensure all my business assets were completely protected. I also made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I would document everything and be prepared to show the extended family exactly what had been happening if they tried to paint me as the villain. That night, I drafted a detailed timeline of financial contributions, complete with bank records and documentation. If this was going to become a family war, I would be armed with facts, not emotions. The truth would be my shield against their inevitable attempts to gaslight and manipulate. The first indication that my parents had discovered the canceled transfers came at 9:17 a.m. the following Wednesday. I was at a job site overseeing electrical work when my phone exploded with notifications. From Mom. There must be an error with the bank. Your monthly transfer hasn't gone through. From Dad. Call immediately about the financial situation. This is unacceptable. 3 missed calls from their number in the span of 5 minutes. I silenced my phone and finished my meeting, maintaining professional composure despite knowing my family was probably going insane. By the time I returned to my truck, I had 7 missed calls and a voicemail from my father that began with heavy breathing and ended with, "This childish behavior stops now, Alice. You have responsibilities." Responsibilities. As if I hadn't been carrying more than my share for years. Instead of calling back immediately, I drove to my office and asked my assistant Tina to hold all non-urgent calls. I needed to prepare for this conversation. After 30 minutes of collecting my thoughts and reviewing financial facts, I called my parents' house. My mother answered on the first ring. "Alice, thank God. Has there been some error with the bank?" "It's not an error," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I've canceled the transfers." Silence. "What?" "But the mortgage payment is due in 2 days." "I'm aware of that." "I don't understand. Is this about the meeting with Thomas? Are you punishing us over some perceived slight?" "Perceived slight?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You remortgaged your house using my money to finance Derek's business, then eliminated me completely from your will. That's not a perceived slight, Mom. That's a calculated decision." I heard muffled conversation. Then my father got on the phone. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. "Your mother is crying." "I'm establishing financial boundaries," I replied, something I should have done years ago. "We're your parents," he shouted. "You can't set boundaries with us. We raised you, gave you a roof, fed you, and I've paid that back 10 times over," I interrupted. "I have contributed over $175,000 to your household in just the last 5 years. Money that apparently went to Derek's failed businesses and this new mortgage I knew nothing about." The conversation deteriorated from there. My father threatened. My mother pleaded. I remained firm. It ended with my father declaring, "If this is how you want it, fine. Don't expect to be welcome at Sunday dinner ever again." It was supposed to hurt me, but instead I felt strangely liberated. "That works for me," I said. "Goodbye." Over the following weeks, my family's pressure campaign intensified. Daily calls, emotional text messages, even a tearful voicemail from my mother saying, "We don't understand why you're punishing us like this after everything we've sacrificed for you." The gaslighting was breathtaking in its audacity. They hadn't sacrificed anything for me since I was 18. If anything, I had been the one making sacrifices to support them. And, by extension, Derek. The psychological warfare became more sophisticated as days passed. My mother began calling my colleagues, claiming she was worried about Alice's mental state and asking if they'd noticed any changes in my behavior. When my friend Michael told me about her call to his construction company, I realized they were trying to damage my professional reputation to pressure me back into compliance. "She actually suggested you might be having a breakdown," Michael reported over beers one evening. "Said the family was concerned about your erratic financial decisions and wondered if work stress was affecting your judgment." This was a new low even for them. Attacking my professional credibility crossed a line I hadn't expected them to cross. It made me realize how desperate they'd become and how little they actually respected me as a person. To them, I was truly just a resource to be manipulated, not a human being with legitimate grievances. I began documenting these calls, asking friends and colleagues to keep records of any contact from my family members. My lawyer friend Sarah suggested I might need a restraining order if the harassment continued to escalate. "They're essentially stalking you through your professional network," she pointed out. "That's not normal family dysfunction. That's potentially illegal behavior." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same parents who had dismissed my feelings and contributions for years were now claiming to be concerned about my mental health because I'd finally stood up for myself. They couldn't conceive that my decision was rational and long overdue. In their minds, only mental illness could explain why their personal ATM had suddenly stopped dispensing cash. 3 days after I had canceled the transfers, I was reviewing quarterly projections when my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Mortgage payment due today. Bank threatening foreclosure if not received by 5 p.m. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I typed 2 words and hit send. Not mine. My mother's response came almost immediately, a single crying emoji followed by silence. It was emotional manipulation 101. Designed to trigger guilt without actually addressing the real issue. 20 minutes later, my father called. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded without preamble. "Your mother is having a breakdown." "I've made my position clear," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The mortgage isn't my responsibility." "We're about to lose our house," he shouted. "The house you grew up in. The house you remortgaged to finance Derek's business without telling me, despite knowing I was making the payments," I corrected. "The house that's going to Derek anyway, according to your estate plan." The confrontations continued, including my parents showing up at my workplace, creating scenes that threatened my professional reputation. But I held firm. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first, not out of selfishness, but out of necessary self-preservation. Months passed. Through my Aunt Emma, I learned that my parents had defaulted on 2 mortgage payments and received formal notice from the bank about potential foreclosure proceedings. Derek's sports bar was struggling, and he'd been forced to take a part-time job to supplement his income. "Reality is hitting them hard," Emma reported during one of our weekly check-in calls. "Derek actually asked your father for advice about possibly selling the business before it completely tanks." "That's surprising," I admitted. Derek had always rejected advice, preferring to learn lessons the hard way. "I think he's finally growing up," Emma suggested. "Nothing matures you quite like facing the consequences of your choices without a bailout." During this period, I began to see the broader impact of my decision rippling through the family system. Extended relatives who had initially taken my parents' side started asking more pointed questions when the full financial picture became clear. Aunt Emma had been instrumental in setting the record straight, sharing the documentation I'd provided about years of one-sided financial support. My cousin Rachel called me directly after learning about the situation from Emma. "I had no idea you'd been supporting them for so long," she said. "When your mom reached out asking for money, she made it sound like you'd suddenly abandoned them for no reason. She never mentioned the estate planning or the fact that you'd been paying their mortgage." This pattern repeated throughout our extended family. My parents had been selectively sharing information, painting themselves as victims of my sudden cruelty while omitting the context that led to my decision. When relatives learned the full story, the years of financial support, the secret remortgage, the exclusion from the will, most of them understood my position completely. Your parents have always had boundary issues, my Uncle Frank confided during a family barbecue I attended without them. Your grandmother used to complain about how your mother would manipulate situations to get what she wanted. I see the same patterns now. It was validating to hear that others had observed these dynamics over the years. I'd often wondered if I was being too sensitive or reading too much into situations. Learning that extended family members had noticed my parents' manipulative tendencies helped confirm that my decision wasn't an overreaction, but a necessary response to long-standing toxic patterns. My own life had settled into a new, healthier rhythm. My business was thriving. I'd finally bought my own house and started dating Lucas, an architect who helped me see what healthy relationships actually looked like. I continued therapy, processing years of normalized manipulation and exploitation. The opportunity for reconciliation came when my father sent me a handwritten letter, the first written communication he'd sent that wasn't an email or text in probably 15 years. I opened it cautiously, half expecting another guilt trip or financial appeal. Instead, I found something I'd never received from my father before, a genuine apology. "Dear Alice," he wrote in his precise engineer's handwriting, "I have started and discarded this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. The simple truth is that your mother and I have treated you unfairly for many years. We took your success and responsibility as license to expect more and more from you while giving less and less in return. The estate planning decisions were the culmination of years of unbalanced family dynamics, and your reaction, while painful for us, was justified. Selling the house and moving to something smaller has been humbling but necessary. For the first time in years, we're living within our means instead of relying on your generosity. I don't expect this letter to immediately repair the damage we've caused to our relationship, but I hope it can be a first step toward a more honest and balanced connection in the future, if you're willing. With love and regret, Dad." I read the letter 3 times, processing its meaning. It contained no requests for money, no subtle guilt trips, no minimization of their actions, just acknowledgement, accountability, and an open door to reconciliation without pressure. I called my father 2 days later. The conversation was initially awkward, both of us uncertain of this new territory where old patterns no longer applied. But gradually, we found our way to more authentic communication than we'd had in years. Over the following weeks, I gradually reestablished contact with my family, taking careful, measured steps rather than an immediate return to previous patterns. Coffee with my father became a weekly ritual. My mother eventually reached out with her own apology. Derek and I had our own reckoning, where he acknowledged his entitled behavior and resentment of my success. For Christmas, I decided to help my parents with a down payment on their condo, not as an ongoing obligation, but as a one-time gift given freely. I made it clear this wasn't a return to previous arrangements, and they accepted the contribution with genuine gratitude rather than entitled expectation. The new year brought continued healing and adjustment. My relationship with Lucas deepened as we discussed a future together. My business continued thriving, and I finally felt free to enjoy my success without the constant drain of family financial obligations. My parents settled into their new, more modest lifestyle with surprising grace. My father's part-time consulting evolved into a small business of his own. My mother began volunteering at a local elementary school and eventually accepted a paid position as a teacher's aide. Derek's growth was perhaps the most surprising development. The humbling experience of business failure, followed by the structured learning environment of his management position, matured him considerably. He began dating a sensible woman who challenged his more impulsive tendencies and developed a genuine interest in understanding business operations. During a family dinner in early spring, now a monthly occurrence rather than the weekly obligation it had been before, my mother made an observation that captured how far we'd all come. "It's strange," she said, looking around the table at her husband, her 2 children, and the partners in our lives. "For years, I worried so much about what would happen to this family if Alice stopped supporting us financially. I never imagined we'd all end up stronger and happier because of it." Later that night, as Lucas and I drove home, he asked if I regretted how things had unfolded. "Only one thing," I replied after thinking about it. I wish I'd established those boundaries years earlier, before resentment had built up on all sides, but I'm grateful we eventually found our way to healthier relationships. That's what matters in the end, he agreed, squeezing my hand. Not that you got there perfectly, but that you got there. In the years since that fateful meeting in the lawyer's office, I've learned profound lessons about family, boundaries, and self-worth. I've discovered that true love doesn't exploit or take for granted. I've realized that sometimes the most loving action is refusing to enable harmful patterns. And perhaps most importantly, I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require returning to unhealthy dynamics. It's possible to forgive while maintaining boundaries necessary for everyone's growth. My family relationships will never be perfect. We all carry scars from the patterns we participated in for decades, but now they're built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine care rather than obligation, exploitation, and unbalanced expectations. That transformation, painful and messy as it was worth every difficult moment along the way. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is stand up for your own worth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their dysfunction, even when it means walking away from everything you've known and starting over on your own terms. There's a peace in my life now that I never thought I'd find. The constant anxiety of wondering what financial emergency would land on my doorstep next is gone. Instead, I wake up every morning with clarity about my priorities, my business, my future, and the man I love. Lucas has been my anchor through all of this. He saw the toll my family's expectations had taken on me long before I had the courage to acknowledge it. When I finally drew the line, he didn't try to sway me one way or the other. He simply stood beside me, reminding me that I deserved fairness, respect, and freedom. In many ways, the strength of our relationship became the mirror I needed. I saw how different life could be when someone loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide. Lucas never asked me for anything beyond honesty and partnership. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't being drained, I was being filled. There were still difficult moments. Holidays remained complicated. Some relatives tried to bridge the gap, inviting me and Lucas to gatherings where my parents were also present. At first, I declined, not ready to reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. But gradually, I learned how to show up without surrendering my boundaries. The first time we all sat at the same table again, I felt the old tension ripple through my body. My father cleared his throat more than usual. My mother fussed with napkins and dishes. Derek avoided eye contact. But I noticed something different too. There was humility in their demeanor, an absence of entitlement that had once been so thick it suffocated every room we entered together. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it exist. And eventually, real conversations replaced the awkwardness. My parents asked about my projects, not with feigned politeness, but with genuine interest. Derek spoke about his new role in management with a tone of responsibility I hadn't heard before. He even admitted, in his own halting way, that he understood now how much I had carried. Forgiveness wasn't a single event. It was a process. Some days I felt open to it. Other days I felt the sting of betrayal all over again. But Lucas reminded me that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past. It was about freeing myself from it. When he proposed to me, on a quiet evening in our backyard, the city skyline glowing in the distance, I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it brought me to tears. Gratitude that I had survived the years of imbalance, gratitude that I had learned to stand tall on my own, and gratitude that I had found a partner who valued me without conditions. The wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the grand displays my parents once insisted upon for Derek's fleeting ventures. Just close friends, a few supportive relatives, and vows that felt like promises I could believe in. My father walked me down the aisle, his hand trembling slightly, his eyes wet with a mixture of regret and pride. My mother cried softly, not from manipulation this time, but from a place of genuine emotion. I chose to let them be there, not because I had forgotten the past, but because I had chosen to build a different future. One where love was not measured in dollar amounts or sacrifices silently endured, but in respect, care, and presence. Today, as I sit in the home Lucas and I designed together, I can finally say that the weight has lifted. My business continues to thrive, my marriage is strong, and my family, while imperfect, has learned to exist with boundaries that honor everyone. I know now that I am more than what I provide. I am worthy of love that doesn't come with conditions. And though the road to this realization was painful, it led me exactly where I was meant to be. With Lucas by my side, I am not just surviving, I am living, fully, freely, and finally on my own terms.